Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Yes, I was just here a few days ago with a post about this same person being unbearable about Valentine's Day. If you didn't see that post, go read it when you have the chance. I'm really considering dropping this friend. I can't do it anymore. So the other night we were talking on the phone about work. Honestly, I really love my job. I work as a teacher's assistant, and I must say my job is very rewarding. I have always been very good with kids. The money honestly isn't bad. We have a lot of vacation time, and the benefits are amazing. The children I work with are autistic. They have learning disabilities, and some have behavioral issues. I really love my job, and I take great pride in what I do. My friend works as a receptionist at a hospital. She only works 2 days a week, and she always has work trauma with other coworkers. My friend has always been in a really bad financial situation. She has to financially support her parents. She spends too much money on her toxic boyfriend, and her card always gets declined. Last time I saw her, she only had $60 in her account. When we were talking about work, my friend asked me how much I made. I stupidly told her, and she said, "Wow, for all this shit you do, they pay you nothing," and then continued by saying, "I make $29 an hour, and I'm really making great money. I have so much money coming in, and I see that in every paycheck." I told her it's not about the money, and if I'm not worried about my finances, then we don't have to focus on that. But she kept going by saying she's making so much money and how fortunate she is. I don't believe she makes $29 an hour. My friend lies a lot so sadly you can't really believe anything she tells you. But I don't see how she's making better money due to her never having money and her always financially supporting her toxic boyfriend by always buying him everything. For his B-Day and Christmas, she spent $2,000 on him. Mostly every day she buys him meals when he's at work, like she would Uber Eat food over to him, or just send him money so he can buy himself food. And he even told her through text, which she showed me, that he was mad at her that she didn't buy him an Xbox for their anniversary and he doesn't whatever crappy gift she wants to give him. For some additional background she knows of my fiancé and what she's experienced. She knows he comes from a wealthy family. Since we're apart for a bit, he has bought my tickets to see him in South Korea, and I know a future with him will be so perfect and will be set for life. The next thing that stung is that I'm going to London tomorrow for the week with my fiancé. My fiancé and I are doing the Cone Fiancé visa, so we have to be apart for a year max. But luckily the government is making it going by fast, so it most likely will be under a year. The long distance is very hard on me and us, but we're making it through. Luckily I have a lot of work vacations, and I'm seeing him on Sunday for the whole week in London, and then in August, I'm spending a month in his home country of South Korea. So my friend asked if she can call me while I'm in London. I told her I'll be busy, but I can always send her a text. She said that's true, you rarely see your fiancé since you'll only be with him for 3 days. Well, technically it's 8 days, and I'm seeing him again for the month in August. I just don't understand why add salt to the wound to a situation she knows is painful for me. I was starting to make so much progress, like I'm no longer crying and sad over my situation. I told my fiancé, and he's so mad. He's so mad that she's bad-mouthing my job and my income. He even said that he knows I make great money and I'm really good at saving. He also thinks what she said about me rarely seeing him was a bitchy comment. He even said this all was the rudest thing she ever said to me. It's sad I don't have many friends, and we've been friends for a while, but I don't think I can do this anymore. I feel like she's become so unbearable lately, and I think it's due to her toxic relationship with her boyfriend, her always staying with him and never leaving. And I think she's jealous in her own way of my relationship with my fiancé. IDK how she's jealous, lol, but my mom said she thinks she is. I really feel like I'm just her unpaid therapist for the relationship she's in. All the horrible comments and really not being a good friend. I don't know what to do. If it's worth telling her and trying to fix our friendship, or should I just distance myself from her? Back to what happened that day. The police did come and take my statement a bit over an hour after I called the non-emergency line. I had video footage and the documentation of my collection ready. And then there was some texts I went out of my way to get from Mill to bait her into a confession. I wanted as much evidence as possible so she couldn't lie to police. When I texted her demanding she get my collection back, she actually LOL'd and told me not a chance, and even boasted that she thought I was a pathetic son-in-law, and my key collection was tacky anyway. I told her to at least tell me what pawn shop she sold the keys to so I could go buy them back and how much they paid her for them. And the dimwit admitted it all right away with glee in text. I had everything I needed for the police before they even showed up. The cops took the whole matter more seriously than I thought. I was worried they'd call it a civil matter since the thief was my Mile, and she had a key to the house. But they arrested Mill before long, and the police went to the pawn shop before it closed to retrieve my collection. I got it all back from the police after a couple of days, and for the moment I put the collection in a safe, secure place that no one can get to. The pawn shop pretty much gave up the entire key collection to police right away like it was a bag of hot potatoes, though I scrutinized every important key brought back. As far as I can tell, it's all there. That was a huge sigh of relief. I took time off work and barely slept for 2 days because of this ordeal. Also, the cabinet Mill broke into is pretty much a loss since she mangled the lock and doors prying it open. Thankfully, it wasn't an antique and just something I got used for $50, so I'm just going to take it to the dump sooner or later. From her text before, I found out Mal sold the whole collection to the pawn for a whopping total of $300. For a collection of hundreds of antique keys valued at $2 to $3 grand as a total, that low number felt like a punch in the gut to me. Likely the pawnbroker knew how valuable the collection could be as a whole. I mean, it's not like hitting a jackpot or anything, but money is still money. Especially when a dumb little lady walks in with a box of goodies. Anyone else hear Mr. Krabs laughing? Anyway, the cost of repayment to the shop was supposed to be on Mill, but my wife paid them back out of our joint account instead. From what the shop owner said, Mal told them the key collection belonged to her deceased husband, and she was sick of the whole collection sitting in storage, so they believed her. But just to be clear, she's not a widow. Her husband divorced her and left the state around 15 years ago. Mill lives off Social Security and food stamps. She also holds garage sales every few months, and she often demanded our soda and beer cans so she could get the deposit money recycling them. Mill doesn't drive. She gets around on an electric scooter that tows a bicycle trailer. She lives in a long paid-off house, and she would not be having money troubles if she wasn't overspending every month. And she always counts on my wife to pick up the slack when she comes up short. My wife and I got in a huge fight when she got home because I had her mother arrested, but I told her I'm done with her enabling of her toxic mother. I said I was changing the locks ASAP and banning her mother from the house. And I also said that either we got marriage counseling or I'd be inquiring about my options for separation from an attorney. I thought my wife would beg me not to do that, but instead she just called me horrible, packed a suitcase, and walked out to go to a motel. I just sat on the couch and let her go. She repeatedly looked like she was waiting for me to ask her to stay, but I didn't. In the morning, she texted me she'd be bailing her mother out and wanted me to transfer her the money to pay for it since I was the one who got her mother arrested. When I said no, all I got back was a sarcastic wow, and that was it. Not too long later, I had a gut feeling and checked the balance on the shared bank account. And my wife had taken out a lot of money. I wasn't sure if all that was needed for bail, so I called the pawn shop later. The owner confirmed my wife had come in and paid him back the $300 that he'd paid her mother for the keys. He was also quite angry and said he didn't want any of us in his shop ever again. I understood his anger and, weirdly enough, had a fairly long talk with this guy. And he understands now that I'm not part of the crazy. I tried to call and text my wife for hours, but she didn't answer. That evening, I managed to find her. I knew which motel she'd likely go to, and I was right. It was both cheap and not far away. I found her car and then figured out which room she was in. She looked positively shocked to see me when she opened the door. I confronted her about the money she'd used from our shared account. She basically said that since I refused to pay her mother's bail after I was the one who had her arrested, she got the money from me another way. Then smugly stated she wasn't paying that money back into the shared account this time and told me that's the karma I get before shutting the door in my face. Then said through the door she'd call the cops on me if I didn't leave. The smug look she'd given me reminded me of nasty teenage girls when they get their way. It really ticked me off. I already knew my marriage was pretty much over, but that night it really sank in. I had a long sight, down with some old video games and cola to think about my future. The house is rented, so I'm not renewing my half of the lease and will soon be apartment hunting. The last month of the lease is March. But I may leave sooner, depending on how soon I can find an apartment. We have no kids yet, thank God. So that's another thing I currently have in my favor. The next day, I changed the locks on the house and removed all of my money from the joint bank account and stopped all automated payments to and from it. I made sure to take only the amount of money I'd put into the account. There was still more than enough in it for me to break even, and still leave the minimum required balance on the account. Either way, the cost of Mill's bail and paying back the pawn shop was now entirely out of my wife's pocket now. And I don't think she's noticed yet, but it shouldn't be long. I've been to a couple different divorce lawyers already, and I picked the second one since the first seemed like they were only there for a paycheck. I'll have the divorce papers served soon. I love my wife, but it's clear she didn't love me. So I can't stay with her anymore. She can have her thieving hoarder mommy all to herself now. We both have very comparable incomes, so I'll be pushing for a clean split divorce. This woman didn't deserve me, and I fell for her act. She didn't want a husband. She wanted an insurance plan. I'll be clear on this. I won't be changing my mind about divorce. My soon-to-be ex-wife can beg and love, bomb all she wants if she even bothers to. I've never been her one. And I'm not going to settle for being two in my own marriage. It is over now? Edit. Yes, I asked the landlord to allow me to change the locks. He was all for it when I told him what happened. All I had to do was mail him a copy of the new key. He doesn't want my mile to ever have a key to the house again. I live alone in a small house, and I've been having some stalker problems lately, so my mind is a bit on the edge. But just a few hours ago, I woke up a vigorous rattling of the doorknob on my back door. I was sleeping at the couch with a lot of my homework sprawled on the table, and I grabbed a pen. The rattling on the doorknob turned into punches and slams into the door as the man started to scream, "Let me in." I screamed back to stay away, but he wouldn't stop. I tried to tell him to back off, but he just kept yelling to let him in. I could see the neighbors turning on their lights as the commotion got louder, and some started going out to take a look. I was sort of relieved because now I have witnesses or backup in case anything bad happens, so I unlocked the door, except I kept the chain and bolt on. I think that's what it's called. He immediately pushed on the door and started screaming to unlatch it. I don't recognize him, but I don't think he'll try anything with people already watching or hearing. I refused to unlock it and told him that this is my house and I wouldn't let him in. In the middle of it, I tried to close it again, but he managed to grab my arm and I reacted by stabbing the pen in his palm. It caused some bleeding and he immediately backed off. It got him to go out into the street where he got recognized by some of my neighbors. Apparently, he is the son of my next-door neighbor and he was drunk, confusing my house for his mom's and tried to get in. There was a lot of apologies I gave to the Lola and her son next door, but I only received death glares as they went back inside their house. The other neighbors were sympathetic but still think I went overboard for stabbing. It's been a while now and I can't sleep anymore because of it. Update. So about 2 months ago, a neighbor tried to forcefully get in my home through the door. Luckily, I have those chain bolts from the inside so he couldn't open it, but he managed to wedge his arm and leg in. It evolved into a screaming match that woke up the neighbors. As he got more aggressive in pushing the door despite the chains, I waved a pen at him to scare him off, but he grabbed my hand, which resulted in me stabbing his palm. He backed off in pain and retreated to his actual house, which was right beside mine, and his mother started screaming at me for stabbing her son. She went back inside with curses as she tended to her wounded son. But what really bothered me was that the other neighbors started giving me looks and faces. For 2 weeks, I endured their glances, murmurs, stares, and even my own assumptions of what they are saying behind my back that I decided to move out. It was tough doing so because it hasn't even been a year since I bought the house and now I am moving. And since it is small, it is hard to hide anything from the neighbors who go out of their way to snoop from the windows. Regardless, I managed to pack my essential stuff and had my brother get me out of the house, and even as I was hurriedly putting my bags into his truck in the dead of night, it seemed like everyone in the neighborhood woke up and just quietly watched me leave. All the lights of their houses turned on, they opened their windows, just staring. My brother got creeped out as well. We started to move faster. As we were about to finish, the son who got stabbed looked smug as he called out insults about, "You think you're so pretty that I'll rape you." Another crap. His mother just shouted, "Pahawa demonyo." Leave demon! It's been 3 days since I moved back, and I have been struck with nightmares, or I could imagine hearing other people's thoughts silently judging me brutally, and I've been scared to go out of the guest room of my brother's house. I'm probably posting this for pity points or whatnot, but I just need to hear or maybe read something that contradicts my own thoughts for once. I am going insane with how fast it's progressing that I'm beginning to doubt the sincerity of my own brother, as he might see me as a burden to him and his family of 3. I'm planning to go back to my parents in the countryside, but I don't have a date yet of when I'll move out. So there I was at the freaking roller coaster with my little dude by my side. Single mom vibes, trying to make some damn memories in this crazy world. We'd been standing in that line forever, feeling the sun cook us like a couple of French fries in a pan. My son's excitement was palpable beside me. As a single mom, these moments meant everything, precious fragments of joy in an often chaotic world. My son, Ethan, was a bright, energetic boy with a heart of gold, but he also carried a unique challenge. He was autistic. From a young age, Ethan's world was one of vibrant colors and intricate patterns, a kaleidoscope of sensations that often overwhelmed his senses. Simple tasks could become monumental challenges, and crowded places like theme parks were a sensory minefield for him. Yet despite the hurdles he faced, Ethan approached each day with a resilience that inspired me. Standing in line, Ethan bounced on his toes, his excitement bubbling over as he eagerly anticipated his turn on the roller coaster. His enthusiasm was infectious, filling me with a warmth that chased away the shadows of doubt that sometimes plagued me as a single mother, navigating the complexities of raising a child with autism. As we inched closer to the front of the line, I couldn't help but marvel at Ethan's bravery. For him, each new experience was a triumph, a testament to his indomitable spirit and unwavering determination. And though I knew that the chaos of the theme park could be overwhelming for him at times, I was determined to ensure that he had the chance to make cherished memories like any other child. My son's grin is like 1,000 watts, and I can't help but match it. It's his turn, last one for this round, just when it's about to be our shining moment. Enter Karen. Yeah, you heard that right. A full-on Karen huffing and puffing like she's about to blow the whole damn theme park down. Now picture this. Karen's got this snotty-nosed kid who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. And she's giving me that look, the one that says, "Move over, lady. My precious angel deserves your spot." I'm having none of that nonsense. Ain't nobody cutting in line on my watch. So I lay it out straight. Sorry, no room for your kiddo. Gotta wait your turn like the rest of us. Well, you'd think I slapped her with a wet fish. She goes from 0 to banshee in 0.5 seconds flat. "How dare you!" she screams, like I just ran over her dog. My mama bear mode kicks in, and I slap my metaphorical chill pill cap on, pat her on the shoulder and go, "Hey, let's all take it down a notch, yeah?" But this Karen's got a screw loose or something, because next thing I know, she's trying to take a chunk out of my hand like I'm a walking sandwich. When Karen's aggression turned physical, my protective instincts surged into overdrive. Shielding Ethan from harm became my sole focus, and I knew that I had to do whatever was necessary to keep him safe. With a resolve born of love and fierce determination, I intervened, ensuring that Karen could no longer pose a threat to my son. Meanwhile, the roller coaster operator is doing the eye on a hidden camera show, face while he tries to get Karen to chill. Like, seriously, dude, we're here for the thrills, not a full-on Karen meltdown. But she ain't done yet. She takes aim and tries to hock a loogie at the operator, but it's like her aim is as bad as her attitude, because she misses by a mile. Thank the universe, though, because security swoops in like superheroes in action. They're not having any of her crazy antics either. They drag her away kicking and screaming, and she's banned from this theme park for life. Guess the magical kingdom ain't a fan of her entitled drama. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. Backstory. This happened quite a few years ago. I was the systems administrator for a small startup media design company. We had approx 14 people on staff, and it was a very relaxed atmosphere. Just for context, a little thing about me. I'm a bit of a geek nerd, and the computer also takes a bit part of my personal life. It fuels some of my biggest hobbies. Not just gaming, but I also enjoy messing with digital, audio, 3D graphics. And as can be seen by this post, I also enjoy online communities. Most importantly, I really enjoyed my work, and thus noteworthy. It wouldn't be the first time when I took some work home with me. That is, I had remote access to our small network, so when something needed to be done, I could often do so from home. And before we continue, I'd also like to emphasize that I truly believe in the good intentions of the bosses. They were really just trying to look after us as best as they could. Our main Carl Otto. The big project ERSI training. The company was run by 2 bosses, but as work piled up for them, or assumption on my part, they started to rely on an office manager, and this dude would sometimes seriously overstate his own importance. At the time of the story, the company had closed a deal with none other than the city council to set up a digital meet and greet with the council members. This sounds horribly trivial right now because online chatting facilities are pretty common these days, but back then it was all still quite new. because I spent a large chunk of my private time online on IRC back then. It didn't take long for the bosses to decide that I should fully handle the technical details of the whole thing, and of course closely work together with our designer. The whole interaction would take place on a custom-built website with chat interface, and as said, an IRC server is back-end. In other words, visitors would use a website to chat using said website, but the whole thing basically ran on an IRC server. Normal users couldn't access that server directly, but obviously I could. I still remember to this very day because I got official permission to use IRC at work, so obviously I kept some of my favorite public chats around as well. IRSSI, Linux-based IRC client, was awesome like that because it could easily connect to multiple servers at the same time. But I digress. The incident. Because the bosses wanted everything to be perfect, they decided to hire an ergonomic specialist who would advise all of us staff members on how to prevent RSI. In case you're not aware, this stands for repetitive strain injury, which is basically a muscle issue caused by usually repetitive motion. And a whole plethora of other things. See its Wikipedia article right here. We all followed along and all of us got some new equipment to make our computers more safer. Cushion pads in front of the keyboard, different chairs with arm legs, a mandatory stress ball, and some other things. Now, despite the fact that I was very skeptical about the whole thing, I still decided to keep an open mind about it and try things out to see where it would lead. I mean, couldn't hurt, right? Well, wrong. After 2 days, I started to notice problems at home. My hands began to hurt. I started getting issues with typing, and me and some online friends got creamed at a Quake tournament, which for a large part, but not all of it, was because of me. No, I wasn't some awesome star Quake player, never have been, but I could still hold my grounds. But that evening I totally sucked. It was bad, really bad. Of course I had a good hunch what was causing all this, so the next day at work I dumped all those RSI gizmos into a closet and went back to the way things were. One of the bosses did briefly ask me about it, but I explained that it just wasn't working out for me and that I was actually starting to get issues. He fully understood, but for some dumb reason the office manager didn't. You have to use those tools, otherwise you're wasting company money. As I suspected, things got a lot better for me, but later that afternoon the officer manager noticed what was going on, and he threw a fit. What in the world was I thinking? Did I have any idea how much money the company had spent on all those improvements? And never mind about me. What if other people needed to use my computer? Then they needed those aides to be there, to which I commented that, as far as I was aware, no one was allowed behind my PC because my network security clearance was practically the same as the boss's. Because of my support role, I had full access to everything. If I wanted to, I could easily pull up all our financial records, for example. Something that actually happened at one time when an external accountant made a visit and needed some of our data. My boss asked me to help them out and thus cleared me do all of that. I still remember because it made me very uncomfortable, despite barely getting to see anything. Anyway, the manager didn't like that comment. First I figured that I would just leave those RSI gizmos lying at the side of my desk, but no, he insisted that I just didn't understand what was good for me and that I had to use those tools. So I complied, though very carefully. That day my speed at getting work done for the big project plummeted, big time. For obvious reasons, I was also no longer doing anything from home anymore. In fact, I had excused myself on IRC and said that I would be taking a break because of the way things went and would severely limit my overall PC time at home as well. Books, fantasy novels, Dragonlance for the win, and TV can also be fun, but as I had expected, my complaints became worse. Houston, we have a major problem. After having spent a whole weekend with barely any private PC interaction, things got from bad to worse that next Monday at work. Even typing became a chore for me. Me, who can type blindly with 2 hands, 4 fingers, at a very decent speed, and without having followed any typing courses. So I took the afternoon off and went to visit my local doctor. His first comment when I described my problems and my theory as to what was causing all of it, "Yeah, you're not the first one with such issues. There seem to be quite a few companies active right now who claim to help prevent RSI, but in fact they're merely fueling a sales model." When I didn't fully understand what he was talking about, he told me that, in his opinion, the ergonomic expert was only in it for the money to sell his merchandise. According to my doctor, the guy should at the very least have realized that if I was already using computers so intensively, both at work and at home, that I was probably already aware of the importance to rest your arms. Instead of dismissing all that he should have given that some extra thought and anticipate for it. So the doctor wrote me a prescription. First, an ointment to help relax my wrists and arm muscles. Then a mandatory 2-week break from work to help recover from having developed mild yet disturbing symptoms of RSI due to unprofessional conduct. The big project was next week, and we weren't even near ready. I honestly felt bad for my boss the next day when I told him what had happened while handing him my doctor's note. He was not happy. He was fuming. No, not directed at me. I had his full support and sympathy, but he still turned red and stomped off to the office manager's desk with me following him. Of course, the office manager denied everything. I had simply misunderstood him. No way would he demand something as dangerous as that. This is when I learned 2 things. Always document things to cover your butt, something I obviously hadn't done. Working in small companies, rules. See, while the bosses had their own office, the rest of us sat at tables in a large room, spread over 2 areas. So the moment the office manager started denying things, some of my coworkers immediately stepped up. "Oh, does that mean I can finally throw this thing in the trash then without getting fired?" My colleague and former friend sneered. Former contact simply watered down over time. The boss turns to me, "Shell, why don't you go home and rest?" No need to get involved with the upcoming drama, to which I nodded and thanked him. But I also told him that I would be contacting them later that week to try and help sort things out. I wasn't sure, but still saw a possible way out of the upcoming doom scenario. Aftermath. As much as I wanted to ignore the whole thing and just do my own thing, I decided to stick with no PC time at home for the next 3 days just in case. Thursday evening, I hopped back online for a short hour and did some asking around. First, I called my colleague, a friend from work, to ask him about the status of the project. In specific, if the designers managed to finish the website. Then I reached out to a dear online friend of mine who also happened to be an undernet IRC operator, and I asked him if there would be a possibility to link our website front end directly to his server, using a dedicated port connection for security purposes. See, the only reason we purchased a commercial IRC server was to comply with certain regulations, security reasons being one of them. Now, my idea obviously wasn't fully on, par with all of that, but if you can't trust an official undernet server to be safe, then who can you? Yeah, that was also meant as a bit of a joke, but what you don't know can't hurt, eh? Or something like that. So I contacted my boss the next day and told him about my plans and that there would still be a way to salvage the whole thing. Though he might not fully like how I was planning on doing that, to which he, jokingly, responded that he was already pissed that I was gone for 2 weeks, so how much worse could it get? Well, the next week the online chat session worked perfectly. We basically set up a dedicated chat channel. My IRCOP friend set up an X instance to keep things safe and quiet, and the chat attendance was quite decent. The week after that, when I got back to work, I did have a small run-in with the office manager who told me that he wasn't happy that I hadn't just told him what the problem was. But I decided not to get into that again and simply responded that he also could have chosen to trust my judgment when I told him I didn't want to use those RSI gizmos. We kept things cordial, but according to my friend, the manager never seemed to dare and question any of my decisions again. I really don't know for sure, but he was convinced. I even joked about it that I would try and keep it in mind when I was going to ask for vacation leave, which never happened, of course. I have a cousin. He is one of the most terrible people I have ever known. Selfish, dishonest, bad temper, you name it. Some years ago, my cousin was manipulating my aging grandmother and mooching off of her. He had her convinced that he was her son, and his kids were her grandkids. My grandmother was starting to suffer from dementia at the time, but was still able to take care of herself. My mother figured out what he was doing and was having none of it. My mother attempted to confront him about it one day at my grandmother's house when he was dropping off his 3 kids for free childcare so he could go do whatever he wanted. He started shouting at my mother and threatening her in the driveway. My mom's dog didn't like this and started barking at him. He started screaming at my mom to get her vicious dog away from his children, that if her dog bit them, he'd sue her, etc., etc. My mom turned to grab her dog's collar and put the dog back in the truck, but while my mom, who was disabled and in her late 50s at the time, had her back turned, and he sucker punched her as hard as he could, knocking her down and breaking her collarbone. Mom knew she was hurt, came up off the ground and told him she'd called cops and pressed charges on him. My grandmother, who you must remember was not exactly in her right mind anymore, but hadn't been diagnosed yet, then screamed at my mother not to cause drama, and if she pressed charges on my cousin, that my grandmother would disown her. My mom went to the doctor, confirmed broken collarbone. The doctor was smart, told her that if a person had done this to her, she could press abuse or assault charges. My mom didn't want to make a fuss. That's when I took over. Fine. If he was going to play dirty, I'd play dirty too. I knew that my cousin had been completely wrecking the house he was living in. He was often late with rent, and the place was falling apart. He had 3 kids full-time and a kid from his first marriage who was there on weekends. I knew that the smaller kids often went to school dirty and in ripped clothes and were constantly sick. The sick children often got my grandmother sick too. With this knowledge in mind, I called CPS at. I'm pretty good at imitating different accents. I knew the call would be recorded, so I disguised my voice and reported that I was scared for those poor children. That I'd seen how dirty they were, how his house was overrun with pets, and I had heard him screaming at the children and was worried that he was being abusive to them. Turns out, I was more right than I knew. Also, apparently, his actual neighbors had been calling Keeps about him too. My call tipped the scales. The next day, Keepy's agents rolled up early in the morning for a surprise inspection. The younger kids were in dirty beds with no proper blankets. There were holes in the floor, bare electrical outlets, cats and cat feces everywhere. Trash and debris everywhere. Apparently, it was so disgusting there that CPS took the kids out to their van and gave him 30 minutes to contact a relative who could safely house them. My aunt came and took the kids to her house. My cousin was given an order, 30 days to get the house in proper shape. Clean and safe for children. Their needs must be visibly met, etc., or his children would be taken away and placed in foster care. He was furious. His wife was furious. They barely managed to get the place fixed in time. I heard about him complaining about some out-of-state nosy jerk called Child Services on me if I ever find out who that jerk was. Blah, blah. I just sat back and laughed. That's what you get for messing with my mom, boy. His name was red flagged for the next several years, and the slightest complaint was investigated immediately. His wife, mother of the 3 who were nearly taken, started hounding him constantly about keeping the house clean because she was the one working to support them. His temper just got worse, and at one point he assaulted his eldest child. His ex-wife pressed charges of child abuse, and he got put in jail for a few days. My dementia-ridden grandmother bailed him out. This got him red-flagged even more, and the police made him surrender all his hunting rifles and handguns. Any time after that, when my grandmother would get sick from some nastiness his kids gave her, I had fun picking up the phone. Because of the red flags, prior arrests for assault, and etc., Child Services stayed on him on a monthly basis. His wife eventually got so tired of CPS constantly coming around trying to take her kids away that she left him and took the kids with her to a different town. When my grandmother passed away, Cousin started some nasty drama with my mom again. He threatened her, locked her out of my grandmother's house, which she had inherited in the will, so he could hold it over her head and try to get her to give him more money. Turns out his temper had gotten him in trouble, and he'd had a right to bear arms taken away. He inherited some guns from my grandparents in the wills. Oops. Guess how the cops found out he had guns in his possession? Yep. That was me, again. I've also gotten him kicked out of Facebook trading groups, signed him up for newsletters, and generally any other petty thing I could think of. My mom now has a restraining order against him, and we haven't seen him in over a year. Last I heard, though, his middle child had run away from home. His second ex-wife has moved with the 2 youngest back to her home state, and he's got nothing since he blew through his inheritance money in less than a year. Just writing this makes me smile all over again. A few years ago, if you consider 25 to be a few, I was in the American military for half an hour, apparently. Here's how it happened. This, by the way, was in the UK. After a strenuous period at work, I was given a few weeks off to relax and decided to head down and visit a very old and dear friend of mine who owned a large property near a military base. This proved to be a mistake as, obviously, it was incredibly noisy due to the arrival of a large number of American troops for some sort of joint training exercise. I got myself some earplugs, a book, and relaxed in the backyard while my friend, who ran a nearby pub, was serving booze and roast dinners. I had just gotten to chapter 6 of a book and was dozing off when my nap was interrupted by the increasingly loud, enraged scream of what turned out to be a large, bald man who looked like he would be wearing sunglasses if he could possibly get away with it. Before I knew it, I was in an arm lock being dragged across the garden to the gate and dragged down the street. Cutting through a large amount of dragging, yelling, and not listening to me at all, we arrived in an office where I was handcuffed to a chair. Enter Provost Robonik, a large man with an amazing red mustache and no other visible hair. Conversation is approximately 20 years. Also, at the time, I was not in the best mood for observation. Provost Robonik: Son, you were caught in the yard of him locale. What you got to say for yourself? Me: Sir, I have no idea what's going on. I'm just staying here with a friend. Provost Robotnik: Soldier, Wait, you're not even American, are you? Me: Someone just came in and grabbed me. I was born in Cornwall. At this point, the man just goes entirely red. I mean solid red. Pulsing vein, gritted teeth, the works. The fact his mustache was vibrating was, after the fact, fascinating. He screamed something in a pitch too military for us mere mortals to understand, and 3 men just materialized. I swear, no one opened a door. They were just there. The man who had dragged me in was manhandled rapidly into the room at what I understand could very quickly become gunpoint if needed. I was unlocked, released, and escorted back to the garden with Robotnik profusely apologizing the whole way. Later, I was told in the pub that the man who had arrested me was up for some sort of promotion and was looking for any tiny thing to gain an edge, and a skiving soldier was just the thing. No one had any idea why he thought I was one. I still exchange Christmas cards with several of the soldiers, and the provost joins us every few years for a roast dinner in the pub. I think he's actually gained weight. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.